Welcome. I'm Bernice Ross, the CEO and president of Brokerage Up and realestatecoach.com. I have my husband and business partner, Byron Van Arsdale, with us today. He's co-owner of realestatecoach.com with me. And Byron has been he's a former broker owner. He's was a top producer, and he has trained over 2,000 coaches. I met him on a Coach U training class. I was training to become a master certified coach, and he was leading it. Who knew what would happen? But what we're going to be talking about today is how new agents can succeed right off the bat. So we're going to get right to it. Byron, what are the two most important things that new agents need to be successful?
All right, so the two things, and the way I look at this is oftentimes this is about getting out of your own way, and this is the way you do it by these two things, is that number one, you take small daily action steps. Again, small daily action steps. And two, you ask a lot of questions. Now, these two things are your biggest resources. Again, the reason I say getting out of your own way is oftentimes new agents are filled with some doubt. They don't know if they have all the answers. They're afraid they don't know all the inventory. They don't know what if they get asked this question, that question, they don't have the answers, and all this crazy stuff is going on inside your head. Your biggest assets are simply if you take small daily action steps and engage in the conversations and the things that get you out meeting and talking with people about real estate. And two, you ask lots and lots of questions. And oddly enough, curiosity is your biggest supporter of these two actions. But if you do all that, then all that noise in your brain that says, oh, I don't know this and all that stuff starts to disappear. And what you really do is start to listen to people around you. And when you ask questions and listen to people, that is a powerful combination. And it's what new agents have as their best assets and the thing they can do consistently. And if you build this skill set now and early in your business, then your longevity and your sustainability as a real estate agent and your success as an agent, you are going to go a long way in this business.
Now, from a training perspective, I would say the three things that you need to do are you need to learn the inventory, learn the contracts, and set up a CRM. But training and coaching go hand in hand because you may know you're supposed to do it, but it's getting to the 6 inches between your ears. So from a training perspective, one of the things that you could do is like wear your badge that has your name badge, and people come up, to you in the market and say, how's the market? Well, ask about their price range, and then offer to send them a CMA and a report from NARRPR.com, which is free to all members of the National Association of Realtors. And you've got a beautiful report you can send to them. And what you've done is you've asked a question, you found out what they need, what price range, or you're thinking about buying and selling, asking those questions, but then you have also offered a service. And that simple approach, I don't care how long you've been in the business, works every time and every price range at every level of experience.
Absolutely.
So Byron, what are some of the, what's the question that you hear most often on the calls that you're leading? What are new agents asking the most often?
How can I compete with more experienced agents when I'm brand new to the business?
I'm going to say training.
Yeah, I'm going to say coaching. And look, here's why. One of the things that new agents bring, what's their biggest asset, is they really don't know what they don't know. Now, let me explain that a little bit. So the reason I say this is one of your biggest assets is because you will do things, you will try things, something will pop in your mind and you'll just take action on it. Whereas a more experienced agent would say, no, I've tried that before, that will never work, or that never works, or, I'm driving down the street, and I've knocked on 5 for sale by owners and every one of them rejected me, so I'm no longer going to do it. But the new agent will simply say, oh, look, somebody wants to sell their house. I think I'll go talk to them. They go knock on the door, and guess what happens? They form a relationship, they form some rapport, basically with the for sale by owner. The for sale by owner says, hey, I really like you. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, they're listing the property.
And of course, the fear comes up and says, yeah, but, most of them are going to slam the door in my face, especially in this, in this time and age.
So there's the second part of this. Okay. So I said the two primary things were, number one, take daily action steps. small daily action steps. And two was ask questions. And so what is really powerful from the new agent perspective is if you really learn to ask questions. In other words, if you get very curious about what your buyers or your sellers or your prospects are really interested in, and you help them understand by asking better and better questions, then what happens is they build a sense of rapport, a sense of trust with you, and a sense of appreciation. Because the hardest part, generally for both sellers and for buyers, is making a clear decision. And I do believe this is the agent's role, is to help the buyer or seller make the best decision possible. So the ability to ask questions, especially early in your career, will only get better as you get more and deeper into your career.
Now, what kinds of questions do I need to be asking?
Probably the first thing to do is look for any type of question that gives you an understanding of what someone is interested in doing, where they're interested in going, what they love about their house, what they love about the property, what they love about the neighborhood. In other words, things that really allow you to dig into what is it that, let's say from a seller's perspective, they really love about this environment, and what do they want to carry over into their new one? And for the buyer, it's what did they love about the environment they lived in? In other words, the walk scores, local shops, family, whatever it was. What is it that got them really interested, and what did they want to carry over? And if you really highlight that, then I think what you'll find is people will quickly be able to find the properties they're really interested in and or selling what they're selling.
Byron, there are two really important things that you just raised here. The first thing I want everybody to notice is that every question that he asked started with the word what. And the two kinds of questions that you want to ask are what and how questions, because those give you open-ended answers. You're going to get more information. Never ask why, because it puts the other person on the defensive. So how or what are the questions that are golden with your clients? But there's another group that you need to be asking questions of, and who is that? Or maybe it's a person.
One of the great things is that oftentimes real estate agents feel like they're alone, that like they're just out there by themselves. They're independent contractors. They just do their own thing. The truth is that you have a huge amount of resources, and this is especially true and necessary for the new agent. So whether it's your owner broker, whether it's your manager, whether it's an experienced agent that you may be mentoring with, or just someone that you befriended, in the process of joining and working with a company, you always, whenever necessary, and look, this would extend to vendors as well, you would ask them, reach out and ask them questions, say, how do you do this? I've got a question, my prospect, my client needs X. I have no idea. How do I figure this out? What do I need to do, et cetera? So reach out to your resources. What you need to be able to do, though, is ask the questions and have the conversations. You can always get the answers back to them later.
Now, so if I don't know the answer to a question, then my client asks a question of me, maybe it's about mortgage or title or whatever it is, then how should I handle that?
Yeah. So one of the things I tell new agents is get really used to not having the answers to all questions. It's really kind of a frustrating thing when you think about this, because in life we grow up with the attempt to have all answers for all questions. Now, look, when you're a top producer and you've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years or something like that, your answer base is going to be really extensive and you'll be able to do it. But look, the skill set really is to figure out, if you don't know the answer to the question, just set a time, when you can get the answer back to them. Because look, most times when someone asks you a question, they don't necessarily need the answer right then and there. And if they do, if there's some odd reason you're working with a buyer and that buyer needs the answer right then and there, that would tell you that they're very, very interested in writing a contract right at that moment. So if someone says, I need X piece of information, you say, great, can I get it back to you? Would be 5 o'clock later today. Be okay. Could I email it to you overnight? Could I send it to you via text tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock? And they say, no, we really need it right now. Go, great. Excuse me for just a moment. I don't have the answer, but I'll go find it. Look, this is where the value of your broker owner, the value of your manager, the value of the mentor you have, these are all people who are on your resource team that you just need to reach out to. And so when you come across questions you don't understand or don't have the answer to, that's immediately where you start to go to get the answers to your questions. Now, one thing, please, if you can find a simple answer, don't bog down your manager, your broker owner, etc. But if you got something that you really don't understand and you really can't get your fingers on it pretty quickly, reach out to them and ask them. This is one of the values of having them on your resource team. And you've got other vendors, mortgage, title, etc., that will be extremely helpful for you as you go. And over time, don't worry, your knowledge base will grow.
When we were prepping for today's show, you had a really interesting observation about how urgent the client's question might be. Could you elaborate on that and what that means? Because it's really important.
Now, when working with your seller or with your buyer, and they ask you a question, you don't have the answer, all you need to say is, I'll be happy to get that information. I don't have that information right now. I'll be happy to get that information for you either by 5 o'clock today or perhaps at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, which would be better for you. So as long as you ask that question and figure out when they need it, and just make sure you deliver it. Now, there's a special case. If they happen to say, no, I need that information right now, I want you to query a little bit more about what the urgency is about. And my sense is that if you find that they're very urgent about that information, that's a very strong buying signal that they're ready to write a contract. Let's assume a buyer, they're ready to sign a contract right then and there. In which case you simply say, excuse me, I'll be right back. And then you reach out to your resource network.
Well, and they will appreciate that too. And I want to circle back just for a moment about, you mentioned vendor network. Your title rep, your mortgage reps, they're happy to help you with things. And when you're first learning, and also a great place to find resources is at your local board of realtors and getting involved with, organized real estate in that respect, because those people, when you may not be able to get your manager or broker owners, the other people in the business that you meet, most of them will be happy to help you, especially when you're new. Byron, one of the things you're going to hear as a new agent, you may go out and say, well, I'm going to try this or I'm going to try that. And some experienced agent is going to tell you, well, I tried that and didn't work. How should they approach that?
Look, every agent, new, experienced top producer is unique. End of the story, right then and there. So what works for you, what happens to be something that might be an absolutely fabulous idea for you, might not work for someone else. So I believe it's always important to listen to what other people say and listen to what their experience is and ask them about their experience. And then you run it through your own filters and say, does that work for me? Does that not? So an example might be, look, you could have someone who is extremely good at Facebook marketing, Facebook ads, and you could have someone who is not. And so if you're that individual who is not very good at Facebook and Facebook marketing, then you just don't do it. You don't try to do it. You stay, in short, Bernice, what we're talking about is you stay within your strengths. So part of your role, and this is one of the reasons that I talk about curiosity being one of your best friends as a new agent, both in the action steps as well as in the asking of questions, is part of what you're learning is, what is it that really works for me? How is it that I really operate well as an agent, and what supports me in my business and supports my clients to have great deals? And if you can identify that early on, then what happens is you get to build your business around your strengths, which will make you very sustainable in the business for many, many years to come. And I might add, very enjoyable for you to build your business. But if you try to do things that aren't your way, you try to do things that you're not very good at, that's just work.
Well, you hear people talking about authenticity. And one of the things we know is that your job boils down to generate leads, convert leads, and close transactions. But nothing happens till you generate a lead. But what comes before that lead is connection and commonality. And then that's when you get trust, which leads to getting the listing. It's not about how many years you've been in the business, it's to what degree that you can build the trust. And the thing that I love, that you kind of really taught me about, Byron, is this notion of, commonality and just,
Mhm.
if you go to a party, you'll find, with Byron is, it's cooking and golf. And golf, it's a toss up as to which is better, which he's going to be talking about. Either one will just take him away on that. That, the golfers find each other, the people who are into, other sports find each other,
Mhm.
what other kinds of
Mhm.
activities, but it's that commonality. So, Byron, what steps do, in terms of listening, how can the people viewing this do a better job so that they can go from, they find the commonalities, but then how do they get to trust?
So this is the whole idea about small daily action steps as well as asking questions. Because look, one of the things that I honestly believe new agents have a huge, huge asset here is they're curious because they're meeting people, they're new in the business. So a lot of the stuff is new. So they're really exploring. And the more that you ask questions of people and understand where people are coming from, and the more that you share with them, then that sense of trust grows. So it happens sometimes over time. Look, sometimes it happens very quickly. NAR statistics show that about 75% of sellers list with the first agent they talk with when they're ready to sell. That was 7.5, which means that new agents, if you're just out talking with people, letting people know that you're in the business and finding out what they need, and that doesn't mean that all you're talking about is real estate. You're talking about life. You're talking about what families are doing, or where the clubs you're going to, or the sporting events or the charity events. I mean, these are all the conversations you're happening in that process. You will invariably meet people who are saying, you know what, we're thinking about selling. Can we talk to you about listing our house? And the answer, of course, to all of that question is always yes. And one of the things that you will find, top producers, the answer that they have for most questions is no. But as a new agent, I want you to have yes as almost every one of your answers. And that's the part about being curious and about finding what it is that you really love about this business and what you really love when you work with people. You start that way, you find that out is by doing the yes. And so, like I said, at 75%, this is a very consistent statistic, I believe, Bernice, 72 to
It's
75%
been right.
holding year after. Yeah, what this tells you is that there are a lot of agents who let go of and don't stay in contact with with the buyer that they sold the house to. So this is opportunity for you as a new agent. And again, most of the time, at least this was true for me, is I ended up bumping into deals totally by accident, simply because I was in action, either being curious, talking with people, finding out what they needed, etc. So again, it may seem a little redundant if I say small daily action steps and asking questions, but those are really two of your primary resources.
So, from a training perspective, now Byron's given you what you need to do, but then training takes you into what specifically he's talked to you about the actions, and that's what coaching is about: is getting into action, it's performing, it's about mindset and then taking action. But
Mhm.
then what actions will you take? That's where your training comes in, because the training and coaching go hand in hand. It's that small action step of having the conversation. And then the second piece, which is both coaching and training, is to offer some sort of benefit or service. That's where you make the deal, because other people are going to be focused on, oh, gee, I've been in the business for 20 years and I'm the top producing agent. And you hear the me stuff. And it's really about being focused on them, not on you. Now, one of the
Hey,
things,
Bernice, hang on a second. Just I want our new agents to really know something. Look, when you've been in the business for 20 years, you'll probably have some great stories. Okay, but you're not in the business for 20 years. So you don't worry about that. What you want to substitute the great stories, which is, as Bernice said, is about me. And that's generally, how do I sell someone on my services? What you want to do is be really curious and ask a lot of questions. Because again, let's go back to this. What every buyer and seller wants to do in a transaction is to make the best decision possible with the information they have today. So your ability to ask questions taps directly into what they need. And in that way, you're giving them a service. So even if you're just a sounding board for them as they work through a decision, the value to them is huge. And though it may not seem like, oh, that's, Byron, that's not really the big deal. The big deal was getting the deal done. The answer is yes, that is the big deal. But I will tell you that the better you help someone make a decision, the better you help them work through their thinking by the way you ask the questions and the consistency, and by remembering what they say and bringing back up. This is excellent sales skills. And this is what, if you build your business on this now, you won't need to tell stories. Honestly, you'll just bypass that whole storytelling stuff, and you say, well, enough about me. Let's ask you some questions. What is it you really want in this, and how do you want this to look like? And tell me more about it, and what's important for you and the family. And so, sorry, Bernice.
This is the secret of sales, is listening. And if you want to really show them you're listening, take notes on what they say, because then they can see that you have heard them. That is a huge, simple training step that you can take. Mm-hmm. Take notes on what they tell you, because then they know you've been. And most top producers you come in with your PowerPoint or whatever, you're going to present, you're going to talk about me and the company and blah, blah. And all they want to make sure that you've heard them and you understand their needs. And when you can do that as a new agent, it's going to give you a tremendous amount of skills. Now, sometimes agents
wait, Bernice, I got to throw this in. Okay, so from a coaching perspective, look, I don't care whether you take notes digitally or if you take them on paper, but the reason for taking the note is not just to show them that you're listening, but it's also to clear your mind. Because if you try to remember everything they say and you go through 5 houses, I guarantee you are going to have alphabet soup in your brain, and you will never remember it, which means that you will be distracted by it. So when you take a note, you really do it as much for you so that you can stay present and ask the questions, and you get the answers, and you always know where their answers are. And it also allows you, if you hear something unusual, like 2 answers conflicting, you could say, hang on a second. What you told me earlier when I asked you this question was you said you wanted XYZ. Now you're telling me you want ABC. So what's the difference between these two? So again, do it for you. Look, your goal, if you aren't distracted, if you aren't trying to remember all these things, if you aren't trying to remember everything that you need to remember, and I'm worried about, how do I look and how do I sound? If you get rid of all that stuff and you simply ask a question and really listen to what they're saying, that's the authenticity that Bernice was talking about. And that is one of the most powerful things you can do in sales, where you being curious and helping them make the best decision. This is where your value is huge to them, not the 20 years experience that you have.
Well, again, the experience comes into it. But one of the things that you said when we were prepping for this show is new agents have skills that they have life skills that they bring to, the business. And I loved your analogy. Would you say more about that?
So this is generally falls in the category what I'll call transferable skills. So whether it's life or business, it doesn't matter. You have transferable skills. No matter what you did before, you've learned things. You learned how to do things. You learned how you do things. And this is really important, because the difference between, and oftentimes when someone gets into real estate, they're so overwhelmed by the stuff that they don't know that they think they have to learn everything. So a specific example, that someone says, I was a social worker and now I'm selling real estate. I never learned selling skills. And I go, no, that's not true. You definitely learn selling skills. You just learn them to apply them in a different environment. So the ability to take transferable skills all of a sudden makes it much easier. So new agents, instead of sitting there saying, oh, I don't know how to do this, this, and this, and this, I just flip the equation around and say, tell me what you used to do. Oh, great. Okay, you have lots of transferable skills. So that jump between applying a skill base you've already learned and learning a brand new skill, is so much smaller. It's so much easier. So again, you have a lot of transferable skills, but again, the whole reason for taking action steps and being curious and asking questions is so you really get to learn who you are, what your selling style is, what the type of buyers and sellers you want to work with, the type of properties, etc. And definitely this is why training, which is helping you to understand the base components behind what the business is and give you that sense of confidence, and the taking of the action, which is what goes on inside, between your ears. This is why these two things are married so closely in real estate, because they just help you. It just like turbocharges your growth.
One of the number one skills that you need, Byron, when you're a brand new agent and anytime in the business, the people who succeed in the business are good problem solvers. But anyone who's raised children, you have transferable skills because you went through the terrible twos in kindergarten, and misbehavior and acting out. You're going to get that from your clients. So, if you can handle a 2-year-old's tantrum and a 5-year-old or what, in that spectrum of childhood stuff, because people do get upset and revert back to childhood behaviors sometimes. So I love this notion of transferable skills. So to kind of sum up for today, what's your final advice for new agents? We've talked about taking action. We've talked about asking questions and building connection. That's how you compete and giving great service. What's your final advice for the new agents and for the broker owners and experienced agents who may be helping new agents?
Look, so why don't we talk to the broker owners just for a moment, the managers and broker owners just for a moment on this one. Look, when a new agent comes into your office, you already know, you've been through this, you've seen it. So here's a recommendation. One of the differences, this is an expert coaching tip for you. One of the differences that I've seen between consultants, trainers, mentors, and coaches is that coaches tend to ask different types of questions. And the reason they ask different types of questions is because the coach, independent of all the other trainer, mentor, etc., the coach looks at a client and sees them as fully functional, fully capable, and fully resourceful. And I'll say that again, functional, capable, and resourceful. So when you view your new agents as fully capable, fully functional, and fully resourceful, even though inside your brain you're going to say they are not, okay, look, yeah, you get that, okay, but they're new agents, they'll learn, they'll do just fine. But if we see them that way, you will tend to ask them different questions. And the reason these three components are so important is because in training or mentoring, or in training mentoring, what happens is you're kind of going for a low standard, a bottom standard that everyone meets. But when you're working with that individual agent, what you're really looking at is, how do I, as a broker owner, unleash their high potential? And look, they're going to question themselves. The new agent will question himself or herself plenty and doubt a lot. So what you will be able to see, and you'll be able to ask questions this way, you say, okay, if you really know how to do this, how would you do it? So it's a different way to ask the question. And I believe this is really important, because oftentimes what the new agent lacks in experience, what they have is that sense of go and intuition and jump. And they will just jump off, cliffs and say, well, let's try this. Let's see what happens. And that is what you want to maximize for them, so they can quickly learn, get their experience, get that confidence, get the deals under their belt, and then they're going to be fabulous producers.
The manager that I worked for at John Douglas Company for like 15 years, and it used to drive me nuts because I'd worked for a broker before him, that I would go and ask a question, I'd get an answer. And Randy would always say, well, how would you do it? And I said, I could do this. He says, okay, go. And that used to drive me nuts. But what he was building is that office was one that was very collaborative. And it was one where also people became very, competent, because he encouraged us to find our answers ourselves. And just as a takeaway for, again, managers and broker owners, if one of your agents has an issue and, you want to just, ask them to always bring a solution before they talk to you, but, what would they do? Because it's going to build their confidence, and it's going to make them a better agent. So anyway, Byron, one final takeaway?
Look, I'm going to be a little consistent about this. Generate leads, convert leads, close transactions. What you want to do is tattoo that on the inside of your eyelids, your brain, wherever it is that you always see it. Put it on the Post-it note. So for new agents, the most important thing you have is actually time. And so how you spend your time is really important. And if you are generating leads, converting leads, and closing transactions, you are doing the very things that's going to build a foundation, a strong foundation for your business. So that the way to do that is small daily action steps and ask questions, all the while being very curious.
And listen. So
Oh
anyway,
yeah,
we've been
and
visiting.
listen.
Anyway, we've been visiting with Byron Van Arsdale. He's the co-owner of realestatecoach.com. He's trained over 2,000 different coaches and has done a lot of coaching with new agents, which is obvious. Byron, thank you again for being with us today. And we'll see you next time.
Good luck.